Yeshua is the living word, and the joy and rejoicing of my heart. Yeshua is the living word, and the joy and rejoicing of my heart. He is the bread that sent down from heaven to feed the flock of Abraham. He is the bread that sent down from heaven to feed the flock of Abraham. To feed the flock of Abraham. To feed the flock of Abraham.
Shalom, I'm Neil and this is my wife Jamie.
Shalom.
Welcome to our Fort Lauderdale home and welcome to Jewish Jewels. We have a special holiday program for you today. It's about the holiday called Purim. Jamie, that's not one of the feasts of the Lord in Leviticus 23, but it does have a biblical basis. It's based on events in the Book of Esther, which tell the story that led up to this particular holiday. It's a story about a man named Haman, a wicked man, and his intention to destroy the Jewish people. And the Hebrew word pur literally means lot, as in choosing a lot, and Purim is the plural, and that's what this book is about and what the holiday is about. It's his intention to destroy the Jewish people back in the 5th century BC.
And he wasn't successful, and Hitler wasn't successful, and some people think Hitler was the first one, you know, to try to exterminate the Jews. He wasn't, of course. Anti-Semitism goes back a long way, because the enemy of God has been there for a long time.
From the beginning.
The Jews, unfortunately, still have an enemy even today, but even though the enemy is very real, the Jewish people have an even greater advocate, and he is God, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
And that's why Haman's plan failed, and it caused great gladness amongst the Jewish people. It was a time of rejoicing. A holiday was proclaimed for the 13th and the 14th day of the month of Adar, and it's continued to be celebrated even till today.
Yeah, I'd like to share with our friends about our home congregation. In our temple, it's called Temple Aron HaKodesh here in Fort Lauderdale, we have special Purim services filled with joy and victory. The children especially enjoy Purim. They dress up in costumes, as you can see. Look at all the beautiful Queen Esthers. Here's Jonathan Goldenberg as the hero of the Purim story, Mordecai. Neil, did you know that in the 2nd century, well, actually up until the 2nd century, this holiday was not called Purim at all. It was called the Day of Mordecai, or the Day of Protection, which really explains what it is.
Jamie, I did not know that until we did the research for this particular program. But let's begin the celebration as we did at our temple with a time of joyful praise and worship.
Sing in one accord, let there be celebration and joy in the house of the Lord, in the house of the Lord, in the house of the Lord. Hey!
You may have noticed the little boy in blue with the gold crown dancing in the center of the circle. That's our youngest son, Jesse, who loves to join his teacher, Marcy Shapiro, as she praises the Lord in the dance. We were also joined at Purim by our good friend, Sylvia Candiv Hurston, who shared with me some of her thoughts about Purim.
Well, I know this is Purim, and you would like to know perhaps what I know about Purim. And I would have to say, I knew nothing in all of my years being born a physical Jew, living as a Jew, and until I met Yeshua, until he took me as his own, I did not know anything about Judaism or the Bible. I didn't even know that Jesus was Jewish. That's pretty dumb. But only until I accepted the Lord, he totally made me completely Jewish, and now I know about Purim.
Sylvia is one of our favorite Jewish jewels, and I have another one right here. It's this silver megillah case, which was lent to us by a good friend of Jewish jewels. Inside is the scroll of Esther, or the Megillah of Esther. And long before there were printed books, scribes used to write the scriptures on pieces of parchment like this, made from animal skin and sewn together into books and kept into cases like this for their physical protection. Before we begin the story, I need to read the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kidshanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivonu al mikra megillah.
You know, Neil, in most synagogues, I would say basically every synagogue, the entire Megillah is read at Purim.
The whole story.
The whole story. And in our temple, the rabbi's wife, Marty Kollner, reads the entire Purim story to our children.
Long ago, a king named Ahasuerus ruled a land called Persia. Many Jews had come there, and the Jews and the Persians lived in peace and harmony. One day, King Ahasuerus gave a banquet for everyone in the city of Shushan. When the merriment was at its height, the king wanted to show off the beauty of his queen, Vashti. He ordered her to appear before his guests. But Queen Vashti didn't like to be ordered around like a servant, and she refused to come. King Ahasuerus was furious. "No one disobeys the king," he said, and he ordered Vashti banished from his kingdom. King Ahasuerus decided to find a new queen. He called his advisors and said, "Find the fairest young women in my kingdom," he told them. "Bring them to the palace, and I will choose the one that pleases me for my new queen." Among those chosen by the officers was a Jewish girl named Esther. She was an orphan who lived with her cousin Mordecai. He had adopted Esther and had raised her as his own daughter. Esther did not care about becoming a queen. She liked living with Mordecai. "But you must obey the king's order," Mordecai told her, and so Esther was taken away to the king's palace. Many young women were brought before King Ahasuerus. None pleased him. But when he saw Esther, he fell in love with her beauty and gentleness and chose her to be Queen of Persia. Mordecai was the king's scribe. He wrote letters for the king. He sat in the palace courtyard, and he and Esther sent messages to each other. One day, Mordecai heard two guards whispering. He overheard them plotting to kill the king. Quickly, he sent word to Esther, and she told King Ahasuerus, and his life was saved. Mordecai had saved the king's life. Now, among the noblemen at court was a man named Haman. He was King Ahasuerus' chief advisor, and except for the king, he was the most powerful man in all of Persia. Everyone had to bow down to him when he passed. One morning, Haman came to the palace. Everyone bowed low before him, except for one man who stood straight and tall. Haman was very angry. "Who are you?" he demanded. "How dare you stand when all must bow down to me?" "My name is Mordecai," the man answered. "I am a Jew. Jews shall never bow down to men as if to worship them."
Jamie, before we continue the story, I think we better explain what the children were doing.
Yes, I think we should. You may have noticed that every time that name was mentioned, that name of Haman, everyone made a terrible racket, and they were twirling those things in some of these. This is an antique one or an old-fashioned type.
And this is a high-tech one, and they're called
Groggers,
which is the Hebrew word for noisemaker.
Actually, they're called ra'ashanim in the Hebrew. Means the same thing. And interesting, these groggers.
They have a biblical basis.
Yeah, why don't you tell us about that?
Okay. When Israel came out of Egypt, the Amalekites attacked them, but for God's intervention would have destroyed them. God said something very interesting in Exodus 17, verse 14.
He says, "I will utterly blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven."
Well, the story continues about 1,000 years later. Saul has been appointed as the first king over Israel, and God says to him, I'm reading in 1 Samuel 15 now, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, I will punish what Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him on the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them." Well, Saul didn't do that. A few verses down it says, "But Saul and the people spared Agag." Now, Agag was the king of the Amalekites. The story continues in the Book of Esther in chapter 3, verse 1. "After these things, King Ahasuerus promoted Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite." So here we have the picture. From the Amalekites, through Saul, to Haman, who's now the adversary of the Jewish people in this story. And so we try, during the celebration of Purim, to blot out or drown out the very name of Haman every time it's mentioned.
And because Saul disobeyed, we had a Haman,
Yes.
basically. That
Yes.
goes to show the importance of the obedience of one person, doesn't it? You know, today we boo Haman and we twirl groggers, but I read that children in olden times used to write the name of Haman on the bottom of their shoes and then stomp it out. So Sarah Storch tried that this year, and I think it was a really good idea.
And God has certainly put everything under the Messiah's feet. And if we abide in him, then we can walk in the victory. Jamie, let's continue the story where Marty left off, okay? Mordecai wouldn't bow down. Haman was furious. So he went to the king and he said, "Oh, King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people in your kingdom who are different from all the other people." And you know, all he was saying was that they were sanctified, separated, different. That's what we're called to be. He went on to say, "King, may a decree be issued to annihilate this people." And the king agreed. And lots, or Purim, were drawn to determine what day it should be done on. And the day for annihilating the Jews was set for the 13th of Adar.
And of course, when the Jewish people heard this, they were horrified. There was great mourning and weeping, fasting, lying in sackcloth and ashes. And Queen Esther herself, when she found out, was deeply distressed, the Bible tells us. And then Mordecai sent her a message and said, "Look, you must go to the king and plead on behalf of our people." Esther's reply is as follows in the 4th chapter of the book. Esther said, "Well, anyone who goes into the inner court of the king who has not been called will be put to death, and I have not been called for these 30 days.
Right.
So then Mordecai sent back to her and said, "Do not think in your heart that you will escape in the king's palace more than any of the other Jews. For if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have been called to the kingdom for such a time as this?" And then Esther sent a message back to Mordecai saying, "Go, gather all the Jews that are present in Shushan. Fast for me, neither eat nor drink for 3 days or nights. My maids and I will do likewise. And then I will go to the king, which is against the law, and if I perish, I perish."
This Haman spirit with its irrational hatred of the Jews is still alive in the world today. We call it anti-Semitism. And each year at about the time of Purim, the elders in our congregation call an Esther fast, 3 days of fasting and prayer, asking God to combat this anti-Semitic spirit in the world. Well, at the end of Esther's fast, she went in to see the king, and he did extend the scepter to her. And this is what he said: "What do you wish, Queen Esther? What is your request? It shall be given to you up to half my kingdom."
Esther requested that the king and Haman come to a banquet that she was going to prepare. And at that banquet, the king asked her again for her to petition, and she said, "Please, let you and Haman come to another banquet that I will prepare tomorrow." Well, Haman was filled with joy as he left that day. But when he saw Mordecai the Jew, the Bible says he was filled with indignation and irrational hatred. So Haman went home to his wife and friends, and they said, "Well, prepare a gallows and hang Mordecai on it." That night, in the providence of God, the king could not sleep.
He called for his servant to read to him from the Chronicles of the King, figuring that was boring enough to put anyone to sleep. And the king read, and the servant read to the king and said, "Mordecai saved your life." And the king said, "Well, was anything done to reward him?" "No, your majesty." "Well, what shall we do to reward him?" Just at that time, Haman had come into the outer court to suggest that Mordecai be put to death. And the king said to his servant, "Who's there in the outer court?" "Haman, your majesty." "Let him come in." So Haman came in, and the king asked him, "What shall be done for the man the king wishes to honor?" Now Haman thought, who else would the king want to honor but me? And he said, "Well, let him be dressed in the king's robe and placed on the king's horse, and a servant going before him proclaiming, 'This is how the king treats the man he wishes to honor.'" And the king said, "So be it. Haman, go and do so to Mordecai." Well, Haman was distraught. But what happened, Jamie?
Well, then there was the second banquet. And as you remember, you know, the king said to Queen Esther, "Well, what is your petition?" And finally she said to him, "Spare my life and the life of my people." And King Ahasuerus said, "Well, who would be trying to take it?" And she said, "The adversary, that wicked Haman." And you know what was happened. The gallows that had been constructed for Mordecai was then used to hang Haman. There's more to the story, but we'd like you to hear the whole megillah in song as sung by our oldest son, Jonathan, and his good friend, David, the son of Brenda and Jeremy Storch. And now, Purim Power.
Here's a story all about Purim. Unlike the rest, there's one rule for it. In front of Book of Esther, it's all the same, except we like to mention God's name. It was party time for the Persian king, and if our queen Vashti can get the party going, well, I'm not coming. The queen did shout. The king got the mad, he yelled, land. But none were as beautiful or as grand as Esther, whom the king finally chose. She was a Jew, but so far no one knows. Then Haman, who came on, he was an honored man, but very mean. He made everyone worship him when he came around town. But Mordecai wouldn't bow down.
Oh, I hate that Mordecai. Him and all his people must die.
Haman tricked the king for permission to carry out his evil mission. Mordecai just about Haman's evil plot. For 3 days the Jews prayed a lot. The Esther scared. She went to the king. What do you want? I'll give you anything. Rescue me and my people from Haman. He wants to kill the Jews. You want to save them. King Ahasuerus got very mad. He gave her an order that made Haman sad. Haman was hung, but the Jews were living. They were for the praise and thanksgiving to the God of his life, and stays true and helps us through everything we do. Thank you, Lord, for saving our ancestors. With you, beautiful Queen Esther, we know that life will always come to you if you trust in the Lord. Hallelujah!
Hallelujah is right. A sovereign, all-seeing God had delivered his people from the wicked plans of Haman. So the king gave Mordecai, his new prime minister, the right to proclaim a new edict saying that the Jews could defend themselves, which they successfully did. And on the 13th of Adar, they defeated their enemies, and on the 14th and 15th, a great feast and celebration was proclaimed.
Yes, I'd like to read from Esther chapter 9. The Bible calls Purim the days on which the Jews had rest from their enemies, and the month which was turned from sorrow to joy for them, from mourning to a holiday. They should make them days of feasting, of joy, of sending presents to one another, and gifts to the poor. And this is why we have this box, Neil, on the table today. Now, I know you can read this for me in Hebrew.
Simcha Purim, the joy of Purim.
Right.
Mishlaoch Manot.
That means literally sending portions.
Sending portions.
This is the gifts that would be given.
Do I get...
No, not yet. You get that later. In the vernacular, this is shalach monas. Now, this is a special box that we give gifts to the poor and usually treats. And there's a very special Purim treat in here that's mentioned at the end of our son's Jesse's song. And you'll get to taste it after the song.
Oh, once there was a wicked, wicked man, so powerful, called him Haman. He lied and lied about the Jews, for he was always blaming. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. Oh, today will Mary, Mary be. I need some hamantashen.
As I promised. You know, hamantashen and 5-year-olds are a wonderful combination.
They certainly are. Jesse had a wonderful time this year at Purim, singing, dancing, praising the Lord, and eating the hamantashen that you and Tante Rose had made.
Shalom and welcome to my holiday kitchen where Tante Rose and I are having a great time making hamantashen. Rose, let's talk about that word, hamantashen. What does it mean?
Well, a hamantashen means some people say that it is Haman's head, but I don't think so. My personal opinion is that it was Haman's pockets.
Okay, because of Tash.
Right, and he had deep pockets to get the money from the Jews.
Well, it reminds me of matzah tash, which is a matzah
Right,
tash.
you put in.
Matzah pocket. But I want to know one thing. How could something so delicious, so good, be named after somebody so bad?
Well, you take the devil's food cake. It's so
same idea.
absolutely delicious, and look what's named for.
This is delicious smelling dough. You know,
good.
when Neil comes home on Friday night, sometimes he comes through the door with a little white bakery bag. And I know it's in it because that's hamantashen are my weakness. And he buys me hamantashen. But while I roll out this dough, why don't you tell our friends how we made it?
Okay. Well, here we have 4 cups of flour. We have 4 eggs, 3/4 cup of sugar, tablespoon of orange juice, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, 2 sticks of butter or margarine, and we have teaspoon of vanilla and a rind of 1 orange.
Oh, that makes it.
That
gives
that
it the
makes
flavor.
it absolutely delicious.
Right. And then we're going to fill them. But before we do that, you have to cut these. We're going to do a geometric miracle. We're going to make a circle into a triangle. Because
Right.
Haman's pockets or whatever were supposed to be triangular shaped. So I was supposed to find a round cookie cutter or biscuit cutter. Since I didn't have one, I had this cup.
A
which
good
works
housekeeper uses anything she has in the house.
3 inches, nice. It makes nice rounds.
Right.
So you cut the circles like this, and then I'm going to put them on a greased baking sheet, and we're going to fill them. But why don't you talk to our friends about the filling? while I
Well,
do
there's
this?
many fillings. In Poland, we had a lot of poppy seeds. And you know, Jamie, we grew our own poppy seeds in our garden.
No kidding.
No kidding.
That's neat.
And we would wait, you know, to dry them out and take out the poppy seeds. And we made them with cookies, poppy seed cookies. And we made with poppy seed cakes and a lot of things. And poppy seed, I believe, I like a marmalade.
That's called, what is that called in?
Muin.
Yeah, okay.
But you have a lot of different fillings. You have prunes.
Okay, here's the, I'm going to start putting a little half teaspoon prune. Now, I like the prune.
Right. And then you have cherries. And you could use any
pastry
kind of filling from a
Apricot is
pastry. And even peanut butter and jelly, you could put it in.
Excuse me.
Oh, and that's delicious, Lisa.
Okay.
And, you know, like Jessie loves peanut butter and jelly, you could do that also.
Okay.
And you could use any, I'm watching for you to make the triangular now.
Now,
how
here's
you
the
going to do
circle.
that?
We're going to bring the 2 sides over the top of the filling, and then we're going to bring the 3rd side up and pinch. You pinch really well so that your filling does not come out.
You're not just
2
beautiful,
sides,
but you're smart also.
2 sides, and then the final side. Bring the 2 sides up over the center of the filling, bring the 3rd side up, pinch.
It
And you
looks
see,
delicious.
They started out as circles, and now they're winding up as triangles. Now these are going to bake in a 350-degree oven for about 20 minutes or until light brown.
Boy, I
And
can't
if you-
wait until we're done eating.
The secret is pinching well so that that filling doesn't
Yeah, it
spill out
shouldn't
in the
run
oven.
out.
Right. So we have there 3 cherries and 3 prune. But when we made the batch before, I know they're already
Yeah, and
cool.
we're hiding.
Yeah. So we'll show them to our friends. We'll have a little taste. Okay.
Okay,
There
yes.
you go. Now, this is how they come out of the oven.
Oh, isn't that
Look good enough
beautiful?
to eat, don't you think?
I think we should.
Shall we celebrate?
Of
You
course.
take a prune.
I'll take a prune.
I'll take a cherry.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lord.
Mmm.
What do you think?
Is good. And the oranges taste so
Delicious.
You can get the recipe from our website at jewishjewels.org. Simply select the Resources drop-down menu and then choose Recipes. I'd like to send each of you a dozen of these. I'd like to, but I can't, because Jamie and Tante Rose would kill me. They'd never get out of the kitchen for making these. But do write for the recipe, and they're a lot of fun to make and to eat. But I do have a free gift for you. It's this booklet. It will give you a little bit more of an insight into the Jewish feast called Purim. Each of the Jewish holidays also has a New Covenant significance. They are all explained in this booklet, The Biblical Significance of the Jewish Holidays. You can download a free copy from our website at jewishjewels.org. Simply select the Resources drop-down menu and then choose Jewish Holidays. Remember, that's jewishjewels.org, then Resources, and select Jewish Holidays.
Our Purim celebration ended with a carnival to benefit Sar Shalom Hebrew Academy, our temple school. In Israel and other parts of the world, there are also big Purim parades and costume parties and Purim spiels or plays and much more. Purim is a time to rejoice and have fun. At our Purim carnival, there was a bounce house for all the children. Then each class had a booth set up with activities and prizes. The first grade had a licorice eating contest at Haman's Hanging Gallows. The 5th grade booth was called Mordecai's Fishing Hole. Every angler caught something. Swish the Spies was the 2nd grade's basketball booth. Another winner at the 3rd grade's Make Your Mark. Everyone enjoyed the 8th graders' Haman's Halibut, where the prizes were live goldfish. The kindergarten class had a beanbag toss. The preschoolers' King's Duck Pond was especially enjoyed by the little ones. Crown the Queen ring toss was the 7th grade's challenge to everyone. The 6th grade had a penny toss called Haman Toss-In. The 4th graders' sweet walk had sweets like hamantashen as prizes. Neil, what about the messianic significance of Purim? What is God trying to teach us?
Well, I think there are two main things, James. I think that although God's name is never mentioned in this book, He's there all the time behind the scenes, seeing that He has the right people in the right places at the right time to accomplish His purpose. He's faithful. And no matter who is against us, if He's for us, we're going to be victorious. And I think the other thing that's really important to mention is that there is someone who's against us. He's called the adversary. In Hebrew, that's Hasatan. And maybe you didn't know that, but that's literally a Hebrew word. Satan, Satan. We have an adversary. But not to be fearful about him, just to remember that God is faithful and will deliver us in every situation and circumstance.
And I also think, Neil, that Queen Esther, we can see here as representing maybe even a type of the real body of believers, the bride of Messiah, who is called to take a stand on behalf of the Jewish people, just as Esther did.
Save them from those who want to destroy them.
Corrie ten Booms at the time of Hitler, you know, and who knows what's coming down the road for the Jewish people and what Christians are going to have to do in terms of taking a stand for the Jewish people. I believe that the true lovers of God will take that stand.
Well, let me say this to you. Perhaps you're watching the program today and maybe you do feel as if God has forgotten you and He's not watching out for you. God is there. Maybe He's behind the scenes, but He's never lost sight of you. His love is reaching out to you. His love is going to just set you free from whatever it is that's after you. Let me ask you to pray this with me. God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, I thank You for Your presence in my life. I thank You for reaching out to me to bring me closer to You. I thank You for defending me from the adversary, Hasatan, who seeks to destroy me. I thank You for loving me. I thank You for allowing me to be in the right place at the right time. Amen.
In Yeshua, Jesus, the middle wall of partition is broken down.
Male, female, Jew, Gentile, all one in the Messiah. Each of the Jewish holidays also has a New Covenant significance. They are all explained in this booklet, The Biblical Significance of the Jewish Holidays. You can download a free copy from our website at jewishjewels.org. Simply select the Resources drop-down menu and then choose Jewish Holidays. Remember, that's jewishjewels.org, then Resources, and select Jewish Holidays.